It's nothing serious, my prince. Olaedo was just being careless and spilled some water. I was only advising her to be more careful so the Igwe's courtyard remains clean. We all want the palace to look its best, after all. Her tone was smooth and sweet, as if she had only the best intentions. Olaedo opened her mouth to protest that it was not exactly how it happened, but she shut it again immediately. Long ago, in a beautiful Igbo kingdom, there stood a grand royal compound surrounded by neat thatched huts and towering palm trees. Every morning, the sun rose golden over the village, and its rays danced on the thatch roofs like sparkling crowns of straw. Villagers swept their yards early, leaving the red earth clean and patterns drawn with white chalk, as was the tradition. Laughter of children playing and the crowing of roosters filled the fresh air. Truly, the village was alive and vibrant each day, from the busy market square to the quiet stream where women fetched water in clay pots balanced on their heads. Inside the high walls of the palace compound, life began before the first cocks crow. Olaedo, a young slave girl, woke up on her mat in the corner of a small storage hut. She was called Olaedo, which means gold in Igbo, but she wore only a simple faded wrapper and had no fine possessions. Her life in the palace was hard. She scrubbed the king's courtyard, carried firewood, and polished the royal stools before the Igwe king sat on them each day. Yet Olaedo was kind-hearted and humble, always doing her work with quiet care. She had large, thoughtful eyes and a warm smile, though she often hid that smile when sadness weighed on her heart. As the pink light of dawn crept into the sky, Olaedo picked up a broom made of stiff grass. She hurried to sweep the palace courtyard before anyone else awoke. The courtyard was the heart of the palace, a broad open space with smooth reddish-brown earth, surrounded by several round huts, and one larger obi, the king's meeting hall, with intricate carvings on its wooden doorway. The thatched roof of the obi was thick and strong, keeping out rain and sun. Olaedo always admired those carvings on the doorway. They showed images of proud leopards and eagles, symbols of the Igwe's power. Each time she swept past the entrance, she would pause for a moment to look up. The door was low, so even the mighty Igwe had to bow slightly to enter, a reminder that even a king must bend sometimes. This morning, as Olaedo swept, she hummed a gentle song her mother used to sing. It was one of the few memories she had of her family. Olaedo had been very young when fate brought her to the palace. Her parents were poor farmers from a distant village. During a season of terrible drought, they had struggled to feed their children. In desperation, her father agreed to send Olaedo to the palace to work as a servant, hoping she would at least have food and shelter. Sadly, not long after, both her parents fell ill and passed away, leaving Olaedo truly alone. The palace became her only home, and work became her daily bread. Despite her loneliness, Olaedo tried to remain hopeful. She often remembered her mother's soft voice saying "Echi di ime," an Igbo proverb meaning "tomorrow is pregnant." Her mother explained that nobody knows what tomorrow will bring. It could be something good. Whenever Olaedo felt like crying, she would whisper to herself, "Tomorrow is pregnant. I must not lose hope." This morning was no different. As she swept fallen leaves from the courtyard, she quietly repeated the proverb under her breath. It gave her the strength to face another day of chores and teasing. Just as she finished sweeping, the palace maidens began to stir. These were the other young girls who lived in the palace. Some were servants like Olaedo, and others were daughters of chiefs serving as attendants of the queen. Among them was Oena, a tall, beautiful maiden with skin the color of rich mahogany and eyes that flashed with pride. Oena was not a servant. She was a distant cousin of the Igwe, sent to the palace as a lady-in-waiting. She wore fine clothes, a wrapper of bright blue and yellow patterns, and gold bangles on her wrists. But as beautiful as Oena was on the outside, her heart was not so kind on the inside. She often looked down on those she thought were beneath her, and Olaedo was often the target of her mockery. This morning, Oena stepped out of her hut, stretching lazily. She spotted Olaedo dumping the pile of swept leaves behind a hibiscus bush. With a sly smile, Oena called out loudly, "Olaedo, you lazy girl, have you finished sweeping, or are you still asleep on your feet?" Her voice echoed around the courtyard, drawing the attention of the other palace girls who were now waking up. Olaedo quickly lowered her gaze. "Good morning, Oena. I finished sweeping," she replied softly, trying to be respectful. Oena walked across the courtyard, deliberately stepping on a spot that Olaedo had just cleaned. "You missed a leaf," she said sharply, pointing near her own feet. Sure enough, a single breadfruit leaf lay there. Olaedo hurried over and bent to pick it up. As she did, Oena nudged the water pot that Olaedo had set aside for mopping. The pot tipped and water splashed all over Olaedo's feet and the ground. Several of the waking maidens saw this and began to giggle. Oena feigned surprise. "Oh dear, Olaedo, you are so clumsy," she said in a mock-sweet tone. "See what a mess you've made. You've splashed water everywhere. Did you plan to turn the courtyard into a stream for us?" Olaedo's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She knew it was Oena who had knocked over the pot, but she dared not accuse her openly. Oena was favored in the palace, and no one would believe a mere servant over her. So Olaedo simply said, "I'm sorry. I'll clean it up right away." She fetched a rag and began to soak up the spilled water from the earth. As she crouched on the ground wiping mud, Oena shook her head in pretend disappointment. What would the Igwe say if he saw this mess? "If you weren't so slow and careless, Olaedo, you would be more useful around here," Oena scolded, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Her friends, a few other palace maidens who enjoyed Oena's favor, laughed along, covering their mouths and casting mocking glances at Olaedo. Olaedo felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she kept her head down so no one would see her cry. She scrubbed the muddy water silently, wishing she could sink into the earth and disappear. Her heart ached from the humiliation, but she refused to let the tears fall. She must not give Oena the satisfaction of seeing her weep. Just then, a gentle voice came from across the courtyard. "What is happening here?" Olaedo looked up quickly and saw Prince Obina standing by one of the carved pillars of the obi. Prince Obina was the Igwe's only son and the heir to the throne. He was a young man of about 16, only a few years older than Olaedo. His eyes were bright and curious, and he had a strong, kind face. He wore a simple white tunic and trousers that morning, and an embroidered red cap sat on his head, marking him as royalty. He must have been heading out early, perhaps to go riding or to practice with his spear, when he noticed the commotion in the courtyard. At once, Oena and the other maidens froze. They all dipped into respectful curtsies. "Good morning, my prince," they murmured in unison. Prince Obina approached calmly. Olaedo stood up clumsily, her hands and wrapper muddy. She too bent in a hurried curtsy, avoiding his gaze. Her heart was pounding. She was terrified that he might be angry about the disturbance. The prince's eyes moved from the puddle on the ground to the overturned pot, then to Olaedo's dirtied wrapper and hands. "Are you all right, Olaedo?" he asked gently. He knew her name. Of course he did. They had grown up in the same palace, though their lives were worlds apart. But to Olaedo, it still felt surprising and special whenever he addressed her. I'm fine, my prince," Olaedo managed to say, trembling a bit. Prince Obina frowned slightly. "It's very early to be having such commotion. What happened?" Before Olaedo could speak, Oena stepped forward with a charming smile. "It's nothing serious, my prince. Olaedo was just being careless and spilled some water. I was only advising her to be more careful so the Igwe's courtyard remains clean. We all want the palace to look its best, after all." Her tone was smooth and sweet, as if she had only the best intentions. Olaedo opened her mouth to protest that it was not exactly how it happened, but she shut it again immediately. Who would take her word over Oena's? It would only cause more trouble. Prince Oena, however, did not seem convinced by Oena's sugary explanation. He noticed how Oena wouldn't meet his eyes now, and how Olaedo's hands were shaking slightly as she held the rag. The prince had seen enough palace drama to sense when someone was being bullied. His late mother, the queen, had taught him to treat all people with respect, whether rich or poor, free or servant. He remembered her words well. With a calm but firm voice, the prince said, "Oena, thank you for your concern about the palace cleanliness, but I will ask Olaedo myself." He turned to Olaedo. "Is that what happened? Did you spill the water by accident?" Olaedo gulped. She felt the weight of Oena's warning gaze, as if a dagger were pressed to her back. I was cleaning, and the pot fell," she said quietly, neither lying nor fully telling on Oena. "It was my mistake. I'm very sorry, my prince." Prince Oena did not look entirely satisfied, but he chose not to push further. Instead, he offered Olaedo a hand to help her up from her crouching position. Olaedo hesitated. It was unheard of for a prince to help a servant to her feet, but his eyes were kind and encouraging. She allowed him to help her stand. "Be more careful next time," the prince said, loud enough for all to hear, but his tone was gentle, not scolding. "Accidents happen. There's no need for harsh words so early in the morning." This last part he directed somewhat toward Oena, who flushed slightly at the subtle rebuke. Then Prince Oena looked around at the other girls who had been giggling. "Don't you all have duties this morning? The sun is almost up. The Igwe will soon call for his breakfast. Everyone should attend to their tasks." The girls murmured respectful agreements. "Yes, my prince," and quickly scattered to fetch water, prepare breakfast in the palace kitchen, or get the king's chambers ready. Oena, embarrassed and annoyed, gave Olaedo one last withering glare before turning on her heel and leaving as well, her beaded braids swinging angrily behind her. Soon, only Prince Oena and Olaedo were left in the courtyard. The prince noticed that Olaedo was twisting the rag nervously in her hands. Mud stained her wrapper and feet. Despite that, he saw dignity in the way she held herself, trying not to show her hurt. A small wave of pity and admiration washed over him. "You should wash up and change into a clean wrapper before the morning duties begin," Oena said kindly. "Go on, I'll make sure no one troubles you about this." Olaedo nodded, relief and gratitude flooding her chest. "Thank you, my prince," she whispered. She curtsied deeply to show her respect and thanks. Prince Oena gave her an encouraging smile. As she turned to go, he said, "Olaedo." She paused and looked back at him, surprised that he had more to say. The rising sun cast a soft light across the courtyard, and for a moment the prince thought she looked like a figure carved from golden sunlight, despite the mud and her simple clothes. "Don't let anyone make you feel less than who you are," the prince said softly, so only she could hear. "You work hard, and you deserve respect. All right?" Olaedo's eyes widened. It felt as if a ray of sunshine had touched her heart directly. No one, especially not a royal, had ever spoken to her like that. She didn't trust her voice not to tremble, so she simply nodded and managed a small, grateful smile. Then she hurried off to rinse her feet and change, her heart feeling lighter than it had moments before. Prince Oena watched her go with a thoughtful look. Then he left the courtyard to attend to his morning exercise, unaware of how soon destiny would surprise them all. Meanwhile, Olaedo quickly washed her feet at the outdoor clay basin. The cool water felt refreshing. She changed into her second wrapper. It was old but clean and dry, and wrung out the muddy one to wash properly later. She didn't have many clothes, only 2 plain wrappers and a couple of blouses that a kind older maid had given her when she outgrew her own. Still, Olaedo felt rich in that moment, because the prince's words had given her something precious: self-worth. As she joined the others in the kitchen area to help carry the Igwe's breakfast to the dining hut, Olaedo kept replaying Prince Obina's advice in her mind. Don't let anyone make you feel less than who you are. It felt almost like an older brother's caring guidance. She decided she would try to be braver and not believe the cruel things Oena said about her. The morning went by quickly. Olaedo stayed out of Oena's path as much as possible. She served the Igwe's meal silently and respectfully, keeping her eyes on the ground as she had been taught. Igwe Anozie was a middle-aged man with a broad chest and a stern but not unkind face. He sat at a carved wooden table in his dining hut, eating pounded yam and pepper soup for breakfast. The Igwe barely noticed Olaedo as she poured water for him to wash his hands and then stepped back quietly. That was normal. She was used to being almost invisible to the king. However, Olaedo did catch a brief smile from an unlikely person. Dibia Maduabuchi, the oracle priest. The Dibia was an elder with a snow-white beard and wise dark eyes. He often visited the palace to give spiritual counsel or perform blessings at events. This morning, he had come to speak with Igwe Anozie about preparations for the upcoming New Yam Festival. The Dibia sat on a small stool at the side of the dining hut while the king ate. As Olaedo passed by him, he looked at her thoughtfully. She quickly averted her gaze, but not before he gave her a gentle nod and a little smile, as if he knew something she did not. Puzzled, Olaedo offered a shy smile back, then continued on her way with the empty serving dishes. The New Yam Festival was only a few days away and the whole kingdom was buzzing with excitement. This festival, held at the end of the harvest, was the biggest celebration of the year. There would be feasting, dancing, wrestling contests, and songs. It was a time to thank the gods for a good harvest and to enjoy the bounty of yams, which were considered a sacred crop. For weeks, the palace and village had been preparing. New thatch on the roofs, compounds tidied, drummers practicing their rhythms, and maidens rehearsing special dances to perform before the Igwe and the villagers on festival day. Olaedo loved the festival time, even though it meant extra work for her. She enjoyed hearing the distant drumming at night as she fell asleep, and loved the scent of roasting yams and goat meat in the air. However, it was also a time when the differences in status at the palace became very clear. While girls like Oena would wear their best clothes, coral beads, and even dance in the performances, a servant girl like Olaedo would only watch from the sidelines if she wasn't too busy carrying firewood or serving food to the guests. Sometimes in the past, when no one was looking, Olaedo would secretly mimic the dance moves she saw, swaying her hips and moving her arms gracefully the way the other girls did. She dreamed of what it would be like to join them just once, to feel beautiful and admired. But whenever she caught herself dreaming such things, she would sigh and shake her head. A slave girl dancing before the Igwe. That was as likely as the moon dancing in broad daylight. Unknown to Olaedo, events were about to unfold that would be more astonishing than the moon dancing in daylight. Her pregnant tomorrow was very near, carrying a fate she could never have imagined. The days rushed by, and soon the New Yam Festival arrived. The whole village gathered in the palace grounds for the celebration. By afternoon, the central courtyard of the palace was transformed into a colorful arena. Brightly woven mats were spread on the ground for elders to sit on. The Igwe's throne, a grand wooden chair with elephant tusks arching beside it, was placed on a raised platform shaded by a canopy of fresh palm fronds. Igwe Anozie sat upon it in splendid regalia, wearing robes of royal cloth and a red coral bead crown that glinted in the sun. Prince Obina stood by his father's right side, dressed in his own ceremonial attire, a rich velvet wrapper around his waist, an eagle feather in his cap, and a gleaming bronze bracelet on his arm. He looked every bit the noble young prince. Villagers thronged around, standing or sitting wherever they could find space, eager to watch the festivities. Women balanced trays of roasted yams, ground nuts, and spicy meat skewers to share. Children chased each other, laughing until their mothers hushed them to settle down. Drummers with tall okpokoro drums and flute players sat ready in one corner, the air already alive with a gentle rhythmic beating like the heartbeat of the celebration. A loud boom from a big drum signaled the start of the performances. A troupe of masqueraders in colorful masks leapt into the circle first, dancing energetically to please the spirits and bless the harvest. Then it was time for the maidens' dance. The drummers changed rhythm to a graceful, flowing beat. Oena and the other girls glided into the open space. They moved in unison, swaying and stepping elegantly, their arms waving like the wings of delicate birds. The beads around their waists jingled softly. The crowd murmured in appreciation. It was a beautiful dance indeed. As they danced, Oena cast sidelong glances toward Prince Obina, trying to catch his eye. When the dancers moved closer to the royal seats, she added an extra spin and bowed gracefully, smiling boldly at the prince. Gasps of admiration came from the crowd at her skillful move. Prince Obina gave a polite nod to all the dancers, including Oena, but he did not show any special reaction. However, in his heart, Prince Obina valued character more than show. He found himself thinking briefly of Olaedo at the sidelines, admiring how despite her hard life, she could still smile with joy for others. When the dance ended, the crowd applauded loudly. The maidens, slightly breathless, bowed and left the performance area. Oena felt triumphant. Surely everyone saw her as the star of the dance. She shot a glance at Olaedo as she walked by. Olaedo gave her a genuine smile and a small clap, happy for the dancers. Oena mistook it for envy and lifted her chin proudly, thinking, "I danced before the prince and the whole kingdom, while you hid with the servants. Know your place, slave." Now came the time in the festival for speeches and blessings. Igwe Anozi stood, leaning on a staff carved with the head of a lion. The drummers fell silent. All the villagers listened with respect as their king gave thanks for the harvest and praised the hard-working farmers of the land. He welcomed guests from neighboring villages who had come to celebrate with them. After the king's speech, it was the oracle priest's turn. Dibia Maduabuchi walked to the center of the courtyard, his white robe and beads marking him as a man of the spirits. He raised his hands, and everyone fell into an expectant hush. The air felt suddenly still, as if even the trees were listening. Olaedo, standing at the very edge now, with a pitcher of palm wine to serve elders, felt a slight shiver. There was always something mysterious and powerful about the oracle priest's presence. Dibia Maduabuchi's voice rang out strong and clear. He invoked blessings from the gods, Chukwu, the great creator, and the ancestors who watched over the kingdom. He thanked them for the bountiful yam harvest. Everyone responded, "Ise," Amen, in unison after each prayer. Then, just as the formal blessing was ending and people thought the speeches were over, the Dibia paused. His eyes, which had been gazing upwards, suddenly fluttered and closed. He swayed on his feet. One of the assistant priests stepped forward, thinking the old man might faint, but the Dibia raised a hand to stop him. The crowd murmured in concern and curiosity. When the oracle priest spoke again, his voice was different. It had a strange, deep tone, and it quivered with intensity. "The gods speak," he announced slowly. "A message for Igwe Anozi's household, and for all here." People began to murmur more loudly. "A message from the gods here now?" This was unexpected. Prince Obina stepped forward, worried for the Dibia, but also keenly alert to his words. Igwe Anozie furrowed his brow. He respected the spirits and knew that if a message was being delivered during a festival, it could be something very important. In that pin-drop silence, the Dibia continued, his eyes still shut as if seeing things far away. I see a great change coming. The python sheds its old skin to reveal new shining scales, he intoned in a riddle-like way. People looked at each other, puzzled. Python? New skin? What could that mean? The proud will be humbled, and the humble will be exalted. Onye ruru ala ruru igwe, he declared in Igbo, his voice suddenly thunderous. Many recognized the proverb. It meant, he who reaches the ground reaches the sky. Some elders nodded in understanding. It was saying that humility is the foundation of greatness. Olaedo's heart thumped. That proverb echoed what her mother used to tell her about being hopeful and humble. She leaned forward, forgetting for a moment that she was only a servant at the side of the crowd. Dibia Madwabuchi opened his eyes now, but they looked strange, as if he were seeing someone who wasn't there. The spirits say the time has come. The lowliest in the palace will wear the crown. The one often despised, the one in the shadows, shall be brought to light and honor. This will happen before the next moon rises. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The lowliest in the palace will wear the crown. People started whispering furiously. Did they hear right? A person of low status in the palace becoming royalty? How could that be? Such a thing had never happened before. Igwe Anozi rose halfway from his seat, eyes wide in astonishment. Dibia Madwabuchi, he said in a careful tone, please clarify the message. Who is this lowly person that the gods say will become crowned? The Dibia slowly regained his normal composure. He blinked and wiped his brow. The trance-like aura about him lifted slightly, though his face remained serious. Igwe, he replied respectfully, the message is, as I have spoken. The spirits did not give a name, but the meaning is clear. Someone who is considered low or of no importance in your household will become great as wearing a crown, and soon. At this bold declaration, the crowd erupted into excited chatter. Everyone began speculating at once. Igwe Anozi raised a hand for silence. If this is the will of the gods, we shall see it fulfilled, he declared. From this moment, let no one in my household be treated as low, for any of them could be the chosen one. Voices rose in amazement and speculation. Some villagers shouted guesses. Perhaps the prince would marry someone unexpected, or the Igwe might name a surprising successor. The palace servants glanced at each other in disbelief and wonder. Could one of them truly be destined for the crown? Oena's face had gone pale, then red with shock and anger. Lowliest in the palace? That phrase clearly pointed to a servant, perhaps even that wretched Olaedo. Oena's hands clenched into fists. No, impossible, she thought. How can a slave girl wear the crown? The oracle must be mistaken, or he means something else. But what if it were true? Her stomach twisted. Prince Obinna marry a lowly girl? Her own secret hopes of one day becoming his bride felt like they were being threatened by an absurd prophecy. Oena bit her lip in fury, secretly vowing that she would never allow a mere servant to outshine her. Igwe Anozi's voice boomed again over the crowd, restoring order. Let no one take this prophecy lightly, he warned. We will watch and wait for the signs of its fulfillment. And until it is clear, all members of my household shall be treated with respect. No one is to mock or mistreat any servant or slave, for the gods have spoken that greatness may come from among them. The king's gaze swept across to where the palace servants stood, and even further to where the guards and attendants lingered. His meaning was clear. Anyone under his roof could be the one, so all must be honored. Prince Obinna looked intrigued rather than upset. In his heart, he had always believed people should be judged by their character, not by birth alone. The oracle's prophecy seemed to confirm that idea. He glanced over at the cluster of servants. His gaze found Olaedo. She was standing there with eyes wide and lips parted in astonishment, the jug of palm wine trembling slightly in her hands. Obinna felt a small jolt in his chest. Could it be her? He wondered silently. She is the one they all consider lowest, and she certainly has a humble spirit and a kind heart. If anyone deserved a better fate, it is Olaedo. A hint of a smile touched his lips at the thought. If the prophecy pointed to Olaedo, he realized he wouldn't mind at all. That evening, the palace hummed with curiosity and wonder. No one knew what would happen next, but all sensed that destiny was quietly at work. Prince Obina lay awake that night, the oracle's words echoing in his mind. He wondered hopefully if the prophecy could be pointing to someone like humble Olaedo. The thought made him smile in the dark. Early the next morning, a royal announcement echoed through the palace. Igwe Anozi, after consulting with his council and with Dibia Madwabuchi, declared that by evening there would be a special gathering to identify the person of destiny whom the gods had spoken about. Every young maiden of the palace, whether noble or servant, was ordered to assemble in the throne courtyard, dressed in their best attire. The prince would also be present, and the oracle priest would perform a ritual to reveal the chosen one. This proclamation caused a great stir. The palace buzzed like a beehive. Noble families sent their eligible daughters in fine dresses, thinking perhaps one of them might be picked by the prince or by fate. Palace servants who were young women were also instructed to wear clean clothes and take part, some for the first time in their lives. They had a chance to stand in the same line as chiefs' daughters. Olaedo could hardly believe it when a steward told her she must appear as well. She had assumed the prophecy would concern some other girl, maybe a forgotten distant relative of the king or a well-born maiden in disguise. Nervously, she went to the old wooden chest where her few personal items were kept. She took out the nicest clothes she owned, which were still just a simple patterned cotton wrapper and a faded yellow blouse. She tried to smooth them to look presentable. As she was dressing, the kindly old cook, Neka, peeked into Olaedo's little hut. Neka had always liked Olaedo and thought of her like a daughter. She had heard the announcement and brought something for her. "Olaedo, my child, I have a gift for you," Neka said, holding out a folded cloth. It was a beautiful wrapper cloth dyed in indigo blue with a pattern of swirly white lines. "I was saving this for my own daughter, but she's grown and married now and lives far away. I want you to have it. You should look your best tonight." Olaedo's eyes filled with grateful tears. "Auntie Neka, thank you, but I am just a servant. I don't know if—" "Hush," Neka smiled, pressing the cloth into her hands. "Tonight you are as worthy as any other girl. Didn't the Igwe himself say no one should be treated poorly? Go on, put this on. Let's tie it nicely." Soon, Olaedo was dressed in the lovely blue wrapper. Neka even produced a simple necklace made of polished beads and placed it around Olaedo's neck. With her clean dress and the beads resting against her collarbone, Olaedo felt transformed. She glanced at her reflection in a small cracked mirror. Was that truly herself? She hardly recognized the pretty, hopeful face looking back. Evening arrived and the palace courtyard was lit with oil lanterns and crackling torches. The Igwe sat on his throne with dignified calm, but one could sense his anticipation. Prince Obina stood beside him, scanning the assembling young women with keen interest. There were about 20 maidens gathered, daughters of lords and chiefs in silken wrappers, palace attendants in their best attire, and servant girls looking nervous but excited to be included in such an important event. Olaedo slipped in among the last of the group, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. She felt out of place among the high-born girls. She noticed Oena at the front of the line, looking dazzling in a red outfit embroidered with tiny mirrors that glittered in the torchlight. Oena held her chin high, but when she caught sight of Olaedo in the blue wrapper, her eyes narrowed. She had not expected Olaedo to actually show up, and looking so nice. In fact, Oena had tried to sabotage Olaedo's chances. She even locked Olaedo in a storehouse minutes before the gathering. Luckily, the kind Neka found and freed her just in time. Once all the maidens were assembled, Igwe stood and addressed them. "Daughters of the kingdom," he said in a resonant voice, "as you know, a message was given by the gods during the festival. We are here to let that message unfold. My son, Prince Obina, and I wish you all good fortune. We trust that the one chosen by the gods will be revealed this night." Prince Obina smiled at the girls kindly, though his heart was beating fast. He had already noted that Olaedo was now in the lineup. For one anxious moment, he had feared she wasn't coming when he hadn't seen her at first. But there she was at the back, looking unsure in her pretty indigo wrapper. When the prince's eyes met hers briefly, he gave a tiny nod of encouragement. Olaedo felt a flutter in her stomach and looked down quickly, but not before returning a timid, hopeful smile. Dibia Maduabuchi stepped forward between the king and the maidens. In his hands, he held a small woven basket containing a few cowrie shells and kola nuts, items often used for divination. He spread a white cloth on the ground in front of the line of young women. The night was quiet, except for the crackle of torches. "We will ask the gods to direct us," the oracle announced. He shook the basket of sacred objects, chanting under his breath. Everyone watched with bated breath. The maidens stood very still. Oena held her head high, expecting that if anything mystical happened, it would favor her. Olaedo prayed silently, not even sure what. Perhaps she prayed simply for the truth to be revealed, whoever it might favor. With a final word, Dibia Maduabuchi cast the contents of the basket onto the white cloth. The kola nuts and cowrie shells scattered. For a moment, nothing happened. Some pieces lay still, but two cowrie shells landed with their curved backs oddly facing each other. Then, as if an invisible breeze caught them, the two cowries began to spin on their own. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers, palace staff, and a few villagers who had been allowed to watch from the sides. The cowries clinked and spun, then abruptly, one cowrie shell shot forward across the cloth, skittering straight towards the line of maidens. It stopped right at the feet of one girl in a blue wrapper, Olaedo. The second cowrie shell followed as if pulled by a magnet, stopping on top of the first with a definitive click. It was as if the two shells had come together at Olaedo's toes and would go no further. For a heartbeat, everyone was silent. Olaedo stared down at the shells by her dusty feet in astonishment. She could hardly breathe. "The gods have given a sign," the oracle priest declared, raising his arms. A broad smile broke out on his face as he looked directly at Olaedo. "Behold, the one who was lowly has been chosen for the crown. It is Olaedo." Suddenly, the courtyard erupted into noise. Some people cheered, notably Neka, who clapped her hands joyfully, and several of the servants who knew Olaedo's good heart. Others were simply shocked and began murmuring to each other. An elderly chief's wife exclaimed, "A servant girl chosen? Unbelievable, but we all saw it." Prince Obina let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding and broke into a delighted grin, relief and happiness lighting up his face. Oena, meanwhile, felt as if the ground had opened beneath her. "No!" she shouted before she could stop herself. "It can't be!" She stepped forward as if to dispute the shells, her face contorted in disbelief and anger. "She's just a..." Words failed her as her mind raced. "A slave? A nobody? How could the gods choose her over me?" Igwe stern voice cut through the commotion. "Oena!" The king rarely raised his voice, but now it thundered. "Silence yourself. The gods have spoken. Do not disrespect their decision." Oena realized she had just openly defied not only the prophecy, but the king himself. Fear and shame flooded her. She dropped to her knees, trembling. Forgive me, Igwe," she stammered. I was surprised. The Igwe looked at her coldly for a moment, then turned his gaze to Olaedo, who still stood frozen in shock at the end of the line. Prince Obinna was already striding toward her. When Olaedo saw the prince coming, she suddenly panicked. Perhaps she should kneel or bow. She started to lower herself in a daze, but Prince Obinna gently reached out and took her hand, preventing her from kneeling. Olaedo's eyes filled with tears, overwhelmed. "My prince, she began, not even sure what she wanted to say. Perhaps she was going to insist there must be a mistake, or that she wasn't worthy. But Prince Obinna shook his head, still smiling warmly. "No mistake, Olaedo," he said softly, for her ears alone. "I am very glad it is you." He then led her by the hand toward his father's throne. Dibia Maduabuchi picked up the cowries with a satisfied nod and stepped aside. Igwe Anozi looked at the young woman now standing before him. Could this girl in the simple blue wrapper truly become their queen one day? He saw how humble and frightened she appeared, yet there was a quiet strength in her face and an unmistakable mark of destiny in her eyes. The king recalled the oracle's words, "The one in the shadows shall be brought to light." Indeed, Olaedo had always been in the shadows of the palace, unnoticed, but no longer. One of the elders brought forward a decorative coral bead circlet. It was not the full queen's crown, but a ceremonial headband signifying the prince's chosen bride. Igwe Anozi held it up for all to see. "Kneel, child," he said kindly. Olaedo obeyed. Kneeling on the cushion, an attendant quickly placed on the ground. Igwe Anozi leaned forward and placed the coral circlet gently on Olaedo's head. From this day forth, he proclaimed, his voice echoing across the courtyard, "Olaedo is blessed by the gods and favored by this kingdom. She shall be betrothed to Prince Obinna, and in time she will become our queen." For a moment there was silence, as if everyone needed an extra second to process the wonder of what they had just witnessed. Then a joyous roar of approval rose from the crowd. People cheered and ululated. Prince Obinna helped Olaedo rise to her feet, and for the first time in her life, she stood side by side with the prince in front of all, treated as someone important. Olaedo felt tears of pure joy roll down her cheeks. She was too happy to feel afraid now. With a beaming smile, she bowed her head to Igwe Anozi, and then to the people. I thank you, my king, and I honor the gods," she said in a voice that quivered at first but grew steadier. "I will do my best to be a good queen for our people, by the gods' grace." The Igwe nodded approvingly. Prince Obinna gave Olaedo's hand a gentle squeeze, still standing by her side, letting her know he was there for her. He then raised their joined hands high for everyone to see, as a sign of unity and victory. The crowd cheered even louder, drums suddenly resuming with thunderous celebratory beats. Immediately, servants rushed to prepare a feast. After all, they had just unexpectedly announced a royal engagement. Word spread quickly beyond the palace walls, and villagers gathered outside the gates, singing and shouting congratulations for Olaedo, whom many remembered as the kind girl who never complained despite her hardships. In the midst of the jubilation, Oena remained kneeling off to the side, tears of frustration and despair brimming in her eyes. She felt utterly defeated and terrified of what would happen to her now. She had schemed and bullied, only to see the one she scorned elevated high above her. She expected punishment, or at least banishment from the palace for her outburst. Olaedo, noticing Orena's forlorn figure, gently released Obinna's hand and walked toward the girl who had tormented her for so long. Everyone watched curiously to see what the new royal bride would do. Oena looked up at Olaedo approaching and quickly bowed her head in shame. "I am sorry, so sorry," Oena choked out, hardly believing she was apologizing to Olaedo of all people. "I was so unkind to you. I was wrong." Olaedo gazed at the once proud maiden, now humbled in the dust. In that moment, she let go of all the hurt and anger Oena had caused her. She reached out and took Orena's hands, gently urging her to stand. I forgive you, Oena, Olaedo said sincerely. Her voice was soft but clear, and those nearby could hear her words. Let us be friends. I have no bitterness toward you. This is a happy day for everyone. Oena was stunned by such kindness. Fresh tears flowed, this time not of anger or fear, but of gratitude and remorse. You are truly kind, Olaedo, she whispered, wiping her eyes. Thank you, and congratulations, my queen. She managed a small, respectful smile, accepting Olaedo's forgiveness and friendship. Prince Obinna and Igwe Anozie watched this exchange with pride. Olaedo's merciful act confirmed to them that the gods had indeed chosen well. Such compassion in victory was the mark of a true queen. Soon after, the festivities kicked into full gear once more. The palace staff and guests enjoyed a great feast under the stars. Olaedo was given a place of honor next to Prince Obinna, and she even invited Nneka and some of the servant girls who were her old friends to sit near her. She had not forgotten where she came from. Music and dancing filled the night as everyone celebrated the astonishing twist of fate. At one point during the celebration, Igwe Anozie raised his ivory drinking horn filled with palm wine and called for quiet. Tonight we have witnessed how the heavens can lift up the lowly and topple the proud, the king said, his deep voice carrying to the far edges of the courtyard. Our ancestors have a saying, Egbe bere ugo bere, nkesi ibe ya ebena, nkukwa aya. This means, let the eagle perch, let the kite perch. If one says the other should not, may its wing break. In other words, we must allow each other to thrive. If you try to stop someone else's destiny out of envy, you will only bring misfortune upon yourself. He looked meaningfully toward Oena and a few others who had been unkind to Olaedo, and those individuals nodded earnestly, taking the lesson to heart. The Igwe continued, and what a great lesson we have seen. No one should ever mock the less fortunate. The girl who swept our floors yesterday is becoming queen tomorrow. The one beneath you today may be above you tomorrow. Treat all people with kindness and respect because none of us truly knows what tomorrow will bring. Everyone listening felt the truth of the king's words sink in. There were murmurs of agreement and thoughtful nods. Indeed, many had witnessed how Oena and others mocked Olaedo, and now they felt humbled and ashamed for it. Prince Obinna then added with a bright smile, I have learned something important too, that a good heart is more valuable than any title. Olaedo has the best heart of anyone I know. I am lucky and proud that she will be my wife. At this, cheers erupted again, and Olaedo blushed, smiling shyly but happily. Late that night, after the feast ended and people drifted off to their homes, Olaedo found herself standing in the now quiet courtyard where she had been humiliated just that morning. But now, the lantern light was soft and golden, and she stood not as a servant, but as the beloved future queen. Prince Obinna had gone to escort his father to his chambers, and Olaedo had a quiet moment to herself. She looked around the palace grounds. There, in the shadows, she could see the small hut where she used to sleep, and on the other side stood the grand obi and the royal chambers that would soon be her home. Tears of joy filled her eyes as she thought of how astonishing this day had been. She whispered a prayer of thanks to Chukwu, God, and to her ancestors. She felt certain her parents' spirits were watching and smiling with pride. She remembered her mother's voice saying, Echidi Ime, tomorrow is pregnant. How true those words turned out to be. Yesterday, she was scrubbing floors in rags, and now, after just one amazing day, she was draped in royal beads and being addressed as our queen. Olaedo heard soft footsteps and turned to see Dibia Maduabuchi standing nearby, leaning on his staff. He gave her a gentle smile. It has been quite a day, my daughter, he said. She nodded, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. Yes, wise one. I still feel it is all a dream. The oracle priest chuckled kindly. It is very real. Destiny has revealed itself as it was always meant to be. Wear your new crown with humility and grace, just as you have shown tonight. If you ever need guidance, the ancestors and I are here for you. Olaedo felt warmth blossom in her heart. Thank you, Dibia. I will never forget where I came from. I will strive to be a queen that brings honor to this kingdom and to the gods. As Dibia Maduabuchi wandered off into the darkness, Olaedo glanced up at the sky. The moon was shining brightly, surrounded by a million stars. It seemed to wink down at her, as if sharing a cosmic secret. At the edge of the courtyard, Prince Obina had returned and was watching Olaedo quietly, a fond smile on his face. He approached and offered her his arm. "Shall I escort you to your new chambers, Olaedo?" he asked playfully. Olaedo laughed softly, a sound like tinkling bells, and placed her hand on his arm. Together they walked toward the royal chambers, side by side. Servants along the way bowed happily, calling out, "Congratulations, Adais," which means princess. Some of them could not help but grin as they remembered how that very morning they had seen this same girl on her knees scrubbing a mud puddle. What a change indeed! Before entering, Olaedo paused and looked back one last time at the moonlit courtyard, taking in the whole scene. The neat huts, the golden light on the swept earth, the distant outline of Neka's kitchen hut, and even the shadow of the storehouse door that had briefly been her prison just hours ago. She felt a surge of gratitude and wonder. Her life had changed so suddenly, but she knew in her soul that she would use this change for good. As Prince Obina gently led her inside, Olaedo carried with her all the lessons of her journey. She had gone from a slave girl that everyone mocked to a queen that everyone revered practically overnight. Her story would be told in that kingdom for generations, teaching young and old alike an important truth. The most important lesson in this story is never look down on the poor, the weak, or those who serve you, because life is full of sudden changes, and just as the broom that sweeps the floor today can become the staff that rules tomorrow, the same person mocked in rags can be lifted overnight into glory. So treat everyone with kindness and respect, for destiny does not ask permission before it crowns the humble. And with that, dear friends, our story comes to a close. But remember, the magic of storytelling lives on, waiting to whisk us away on new adventures where the wonders of imagination know no bounds. Goodbye for now, and may your dreams be filled with joy, wonder, and endless possibility. Thank you so much for watching. Please kindly comment, share, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting stories.